If you've ever bought a plant that everybody says is easy, but it's slowly declining in your house, this video might show you why. Hi, my name is Memo, this is my channel, Houseplantygoodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion. You might be able to tell behind me, it's tropical houseplants. So yeah, as I was saying, the kind of reality is that sometimes even the easy plants, it doesn't matter how good you are at care or how dialed in you are, they're sometimes just not meant to be in your specific environment, home, whatever it is that they are being placed in. Because the simple truth is, some plants just don't work specifically because of the conditions of your house. It doesn't matter how good the care that you give to that plant might be. And hopefully during this video, once you learn what that might look like, you're more likely to stop fighting for something that probably isn't going to be happy in your space regardless. In this video, I'll show you the 3 big reasons why some plants are destined to fail in your house, how to quickly tell if a plant is struggling due to your environment, and how to know when it's time to stop trying to force a plant to work. And I'll show you some plants that in most people's houses, even though they are classed as easy care plants, they're anything but. But let's talk about the lie of the easy plants. I have got next to me what is probably the quintessential easy plant that everybody talks about, the golden pothos. Other examples of this might be things like Monstera deliciosa. Some people still seem to think that a fiddle leaf fig is an easy plant, but that is a questionable line of thought at the best of times. And some people also mention Calatheas as easy care plants. Let's have a look, shall we? But before we go into any more detail with this, I think the thing that we all need to start kind of thinking of a bit clearly, easy doesn't mean easy in every condition under every scenario. That's the big thing here. And I'm using some of the more common houseplants for this example. But if you are further down in your journey and you're not necessarily a beginner, maybe you're somebody who's been doing this for a while, and you're maybe a bit more intermediate or a seasoned plant collector, this could apply to a whole plethora of plants, because what is easy when you're first starting off does shift a bit to further down in your collection, in your hobby, where something that like a pothos might be claimed as easy, people might be claiming that a Monstera albo might be easy, or a Thai constellation might be easy. And I can already hear the comments of people saying, but that's not easy. You are proving the point there. It just depends on who's making the comment. But let's stay with the example of the humble pothos. What might be easy in terms of how people consider this plant generally tends to hinge on a certain set of conditions or care requirements that that plant needs in order for it to be easy. That might be something like window direction. So a window direction will play a big part even with some of these easier plants, because if you're not giving it the right light level or even the right amount of light hours, that plant isn't going to be easy. It's going to struggle regardless. And then things like humidity kind of challenges as well. Like for instance, people might be assuming that Calatheas are going to be easy plants. And I know there's probably going to be a lot of people in the comments going, Calatheas are not easy plants, but I have been on the YouTubes for a while now, enough to remember that every time I mention Calathea, there's usually quite a large number of people in the comments going, I don't know what everybody's whinging about. Calatheas are easy for me. So balances. But with things like Calatheas, you need to be aware that when somebody's claiming that it's easy, they might have very good humidity conditions that might emulate things that are closer to their natural environment. And obviously humidity differences there are going to signify the difference between if something is going to be easy or not so easy. And then you need to think about things like temperature fluctuations as well, because some of these plants come from certain parts of the world where in order for them to be easy, because essentially if they're easy, you are replicating a lot of what their natural environment would be like, they don't have a huge temperature fluctuation as to where they're used to growing. Think about things that are very close to the equator or even on the equator those temperatures aren't going to fluctuate throughout the year. They're going to be pretty stable. So depending on the conditions that you've got in your house, if something is meant to be easy, but your house is arctically cold for a long time of the year, or is blisteringly hot and dry, that easy plant, not so easy anymore. And you need to always remember that these plants, and I did a whole video of evolution, I'll link it at the top, have evolved to survive within their natural environment or habitats. And a lot of the times that has got very, very specific conditions. So it's easy for you if your conditions within your house match their natural habitat very, very closely, if not exactly. Then it becomes easy. If you are nowhere near emulating their natural environment, you can see how it stops being quite so easy. Now we need to think about specifically with some of these plants, what is their exact environment? And I've got a Calathea in front of me, and apologies for it looking a bit busted, but this is a very specific shelf. It doesn't get the best light, but it does get some of the better humidity, and I'm still getting some crisping on here. But you need to remember with these types of plants, so the example of a Calathea, they are meant, or well, their natural habitat is the understory of jungle floors. So, and I know people say that and they don't ever follow it up. Let me follow that up. I want you to just imagine for a second what the understory, the true understory of a jungle floor looks like. So, much more reduced light levels because everything above it is being shaded. There's also likely to be much higher concentration of humidity because even if there's wind blowing around, and you might say that some of that might get pushed out through the wind, obviously there's other factors there that will affect the humidity, but something that's very low to the ground is likely to have less disturbance to that humidity than something that is going to be much higher up, and there's probably going to be less plants blocking some of that airflow that's going to be happening. Down below, there's going to be a lot of that. Also, think about what the jungle floor looks like in terms of substrates. I know a lot of people always like, you need to be a bit more dense with the substrate of a Calathea because it's growing in the ground. Correct. But, for instance, in my garden in the UK, which is quite a heavy, dense soil, isn't going to be the same soil that this plant is going to be growing at in the jungle or on the jungle floor. Because what you need to remember is there is hundreds, if not thousands of years of like plant debris on that jungle floor, which means that yes, it might be a bit more moisture retentive, but it's still going to be relatively airy. And that is proven by a lot of us who have tried to grow Calathea in a denser soil mix and maybe haven't done so well, but have done exceptionally well, almost having, and I think most of my Calatheas are in an anthurium soil mix. So as airy as I could possibly get it, and they have been their happiest within that. And I think, at least in my humblest of opinions, that's probably because that anthurium soil mix is actually replicating that top layer of the soil where they might be on the jungle floor because of all of the debris. So leaves, bark, all of these things that are falling onto the ground, it's not dense soil at that point, there's quite a few air gaps. Now think about something that's a bit more succulent, and I know this hasn't got necessarily the most succulent of leaves, but this is a caudiciform plant, so it kind of leans more towards a succulent kind of scenario and what is needed. These things are used to growing in kind of arid, really, really dry areas with a whole bunch of light coming onto them. So that is something that they are adjusted to. If you were to put something like this in a very heavy soil mix and put it somewhere that's really, really dark, you can see that you are really not replicating its environment. So for example, a more common plant would be any form of cactus or succulent. Succulents, you need to do your research a bit more, but a lot of the times for most cacti, true desert cacti, they are used to drier conditions by and large. Not all of them, again, there's always going to be exceptions to the rule, but they're used to very dry conditions, very, very fast draining soil. And I think a lot of people always imagine it just like, oh, they're growing in pure sand because they think desert, they think sand, they think the cacti are growing directly in the sand. I think some of them might be able to do that, but a lot of them have got maybe a touch more moisture retentive. It's still exceptionally light. It's still very sandy, but they'll have a bit more just so they can survive. certain succulents, certain cacti, different conditions. But again, you can see there's a nuance there. So even something that might be simple for some might not be, depending on the conditions. And I cannot tell you how super proud I am of a lot of people that I know that might be growing tropical leafy plants in more kind of desert-like conditions around the world. And they tell me, look, I'm struggling, but I'm growing in this. And I'm just like, that is insane. And you're doing great. And that is you fighting entirely against the system. Or people that are in very wet, very cold, very gray locations, only growing cacti and succulents. You can see you've probably got to work a lot harder rather than somebody that might be closer to their natural environment. And obviously anything like an epiphyte is going to need a lot of air around its roots because that's where it's growing. It's growing in the nooks and crannies. It's not growing in dense soil. So that is going to be a condition that you need to bear in mind when you're bringing a certain plant into your house. Is it an epiphyte? What does that mean? How am I going to keep it in order to replicate that environment as much as possible? And if I can't replicate that environment, maybe that plant isn't for me. So as I said, homes are going to be different. They're going to have different conditions. They might have dry air, which means that something like a Calathea, something that's used to having a lot of constant high levels of humidity because it's on the jungle floor, probably isn't ever going to thrive in your environment unless you are supplementing with something like a humidifier. I know I'm not saying anything that we haven't heard like 1,000 times before, but it still requires to be said. That condition, you are going to fight against it, the humidifier, in order to correct your dry environment to bring in some of that humidity to make this plant easy. You can see how this is already turning into a less easy plant already because you're having to do a lot more. But then also if you've got things like inconsistent lights, say you're living in an apartment and the only windows you have are north-facing windows, you are going to struggle a lot with the light level there, and unless you are then supplementing, so grow lights, which again starts becoming less easy and more involved, that isn't going to be a straight replication of their environment. So somebody in a house with only north-facing windows, and I'm talking about the northern hemisphere. Same thing goes if you're in the southern hemisphere. If you've only got south-facing windows, same issue. And you are growing something like a cacti or succulent, which needs a lot of light. You are going to have to supplement that light because that window is just not going to cut it, especially if you're living in an apartment and you've got other buildings in front of you. So you've got a really bad direction in terms of getting decent light level coming in anyway. But if you've also got buildings in front of it, forget about it. It's going to be very difficult to get the light levels that you need, which then almost immediately makes that a plant much more challenging. And I'll show you an example actually. So golden pothos, touted as a kind of plant that would do okay in low light conditions. But if you are in an apartment with only a north-facing window and that window is getting blocked by light, this plant is still probably not going to be getting enough light for it to be happy long term. And then you're just like, but pothos is something that everybody always says is super easy. But is it though in your condition? And then obviously you need to remember seasonal changes. Granted, I will use my very extreme example of where I'm growing, which is in a conservatory, which means that all around me, above me, there is glass. Yes, this has been replaced recently. It's a more modern conservatory. The actual glass is very thick double glazing, so it's got better insulation. However, this is still going to experience much higher fluctuations in the spring and summer. And trust me, my wallet knows it because I've always got like a supplementary electric heater in here in order to keep it a bit more stable. Otherwise, the fluctuations that would be happening would be absolutely huge. It wouldn't be the same as this being exactly outside in nature in the middle of winter in the UK or even in an unheated greenhouse, but there would still be a significant fluctuation. Same thing goes, and I know I'm going to stop using my extreme example as the example. Let's think about your homes. If you are a kind of person who overheats too much, so you can't have a super warm house all the time, so maybe you don't switch on your heating as much, or you're trying to save some money this winter that's just almost over now, and not switch on your heating all the time, or you are a person that needs aircon on all the summer because you're always overheating and that's also then drying out the air, you can see how some things that might be easy, if you are ticking some of those boxes, are not going to be so easy because you cannot give them that climate that they need. And by climate, I don't just mean the right temperature and humidity, but also I mean stability. But let's have a look at some signs that your plant might be struggling in its environment. And obviously I'm going to be holding up the Calathea for this one because reasons. But say for instance you are getting crispy tips. That is your plant showing you, at least to a certain point, and I know there's other things that will cause crispy tips on plants, not just humidity, but it might mean that you're not dialed in exactly the humidity level that this plant needs. Again, for the people that might question this is in here. This lives in this space. Lowest humidity this place has is 70%. That should tell you something, and that is relatively constant. So yes, you'll get some browning or crisping on the leaves. The other thing that you might get, and ironically enough, this plant does not have it, which is shocking sometimes for a Calathea. If you've got a plant that is constantly battling pests, and I'm not talking about a pest infestation that you've got that you've maybe not been able to clear yet, but I'm talking about a plant that's consistently struggling with pests, struggling all the time with pests. Because you need to remember, and I know some of this is because it's controlled environments, and I'm going to hear the people that are going to say this in the comments before they've even said this. Yes, but it means you're not replicating their environment directly, because in nature they wouldn't be decimated by pests all the time. That's the point I'm trying to make. If their environment isn't kind of replicating what they are used to getting and what they are built to get, because you need to remember pests will attack plants, but also pests are attracted to plants a lot of the times, because some plants, when they are stressed for whatever reason, they're not meeting the conditions, you're not essentially replicating their climate, their environment, everything that they're used to and that what they're built for, they will release pheromones, stress pheromones. Guess what the pests are attracted to as well. So that might be not just early signs, but ongoing signs that something just isn't right. You might be getting slow decline. This plant, believe it or not, is bouncing back at the moment, but there was a point where this plant was declining. So there was only like 1 or 2 leaves that were on it. Now it's coming back. Yes, could it be happier? 100% of the time, but this is a velvet leaf Calathea. This is a Calathea on expert level. But there are certain things that if your plant has slowly been declining, and it doesn't matter what you are doing, you are still seeing that decline happening, whether or not it's your care or your environment, because your care might be trying to adjust for that lack of environment. That is a good sign that maybe that plant isn't suited for your environment as a whole. The next one is a big one as well, because this comes up in questions a lot of the times. No new growth for a very long period of time, or no new growth since you've got that plant. That should tell you something. If you've had a plant and everything else seems okay, it's 100% stable, but nothing has been happening for, like, say, a few months or even a year or even longer, and there is absolutely zero growth, and you've got a plant, and as I always joke, I'm just like, well, at that point I might as well just get a fake plastic plant. If you're not going to do anything and it looks exactly the same, but that should be giving you that indication that it's just like whatever it is that my environment is at, and whatever I'm trying to do to correct that environment to make it closer to what it needs is still not there. That plant is not going to be pushing out new growth because it's not comfortable. It's like, okay, I'm somewhere else. I'm going to just conserve my energy and just stay as I am. I'm fine as I am. And then I'll bring up the example of the Epipremnum pinnatum, the variegated form, because we were talking about this when I first got it, and it had the splits on the leaves, but the leaves were smaller. They should be getting bigger as it's maturing a bit more. But the leaves on this, and a lot of what is sold as trailing plants, not all trailing plants are meant to be climbing plants, but a lot of the plants that are sold as trailing plants are meant to climb. But because you are not giving them something to climb, this is the easiest example I can give you, those leaves are doing what? Yes, they are getting smaller. It means that the conditions are less than ideal for that plant, because the only time they will get bigger is when they've got something to climb up, because, and say it with me, that is what they are used to, that's what they've evolved for in their environment. And let's talk about the trap of just trying harder to replicate their environment. Because essentially, we talked about this already. You are trying to replicate that environment to make it so that this plant is easy because you don't have those conditions. Make sense? So that might look like different things for different people. It might just mean you just constantly keep trying to fertilize the plant. And again, me and everybody else have talked about this until we're blue in the face. Think of fertilizer more like vitamins. That is not what is feeding your plant. I did a whole thing on photosynthesis. I think I did a whole thing on fertilizer as well. I will link the videos at the top if you want to check those out into more detail. But fertilizer is not going to be your answer at that point. Other people, and that's why I'm holding the big red watering can, and I've got a little yellow one here as well. And I've got an even bigger one. I've got the big Mama Jamma green one as well, so it's when you know you've got a problem. More watering isn't always going to be the kind of solution, because a lot of people, at least with tropical plants, will think, oh, it's constantly wet. It's constantly wet. That's obviously where I'm going wrong with this plant. It's not wet enough because my house is not a rainforest, and it shouldn't be a rainforest. Water's not always the solution. You don't get to see a mister very often in my videos, but yes, more misting. Some people still do the misting. I think we've all said this, like, don't mist your plants. Like, do it if you like the fun of it, and do it if you want to be cleaning them with just some plain water. But the humidity rise that you think this is giving just isn't giving it. This, whatever you're misting on the plant is going to be evaporated within a few minutes. That is not a change in humidity. That is just a little sprinkling of, what's it called? It's a bit more like a drizzle in the UK, or something that we sometimes call it sometimes a mizzle. Anybody in the UK might know what I'm talking about here. You know when a drizzle is even smaller and it's almost like a mist, and it's just a bit like, what the heck is this? Mizzle, because it's miserable. But yes, this won't do very much. So save your time and your energy at that point, and either don't bother, or if you want to be cleaning your plants with that and going down with a cloth, I'd still suggest, if you can, lift your plant up, take it to the shower and shower it down when you're watering it. The whole plant gets a nice kind of shower. That's still not going to affect the humidity in the long run, but you can clean your plants that way. Probably a bit easier as well. It will knock off some pests as well as a bonus point. And how about my chronic repotters? It's okay if it's going wrong. I just need to repot it. Obviously, that's what the problem is. It's, you know, it's root bound, it's all these things, or maybe the soil isn't so great in that, like anything to fix something that, because we as human beings want to fix something that we think is fixable because we can do the things, but certain things, and this comes with age with all of us, that we've all kind of appreciated, is some things, try as you might want to fix them, aren't fixable. Something to bear in mind there. And if there's anything I want you to take from this little section of the video, is more care doesn't always mean that you're going to fix the problem. Sometimes more care just means you're going to make the problem worse, because you're giving the plant something else to be stressed about, rather than just the original, the environment isn't right. You've given it the environment isn't right, now I've also got to deal with somebody else like fussing around me. But let's talk about how to know when to stop trying to force it. So a simple kind of checklist that at least I kind of usually use, and it's in my brain, is if a plant has been declining for longer than a year. So this plant always declines in the winter. This is my begonia melanobulata. This plant always declines in the winter. I've now had this for a lifetime to know that that is a problem. Again, it means that my environment isn't replicating what this probably needs, which is likely in this scenario, based on everything that I've seen about its natural environment. My winters in here just are a bit too dark and just are a bit too cold. Everything else should be fine for this. And I've done it that a couple of winters, it's been okay. The moment that that slips a bit too much is the moment where this restarts. The difference with this plant is that every springtime, and you can see it already starting to grow back, I start getting a new flush of leaves. That's fine. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a plant that consistently for a year has only declined, has only ever declined. That's one that you need to start considering. Do I need to maybe stop trying to force a situation here? And then you need to think about, is the problem repeating itself even with all the corrections that I'm doing? Again, that's another sign that maybe you are not able to replicate its environment as much as you think you can. So for example, if this plant, and I've got, as I said, humidity in here, I used this example a moment ago, is at lowest 70% humidity, but this specific Calathea or Gopertia needs humidity levels that are closer to 90%. I can't do that. I can't feasibly have it. I could, but that's me trying to change the environment of every other plant in here to keep one happy. That should tell you something. If you can't keep doing the adjustment, maybe this plant just isn't meant for your environment. I don't have the plant that I was to show you for this one because I got rid of it. I've harped on about this too much. The philodendron lupinum, where nothing changed for a year. It just existed. We've all had plants that just exist. They don't do anything for a year. Again, you really need to start questioning if your conditions or even the care that you're trying to do to adjust for those conditions is doing anything at all. Because if that plant has basically stagnated for a year, it's unlikely that whatever you are going to try next, if you've tried everything already, is going to make a change for that. But some things that you could do as a first stage before you want to give up entirely. Move rooms. So for instance, if I had another room that had high enough humidity for this plant and the light levels were consistent throughout the year, but the temperature didn't drop, so not in here because of the temperature fluctuations, that might work. That environment is still within my house, but if you think of every room or every location in your house as a different microclimate, that little move might be enough to keep this plant happy because where it's now living, that environment is closer to its natural environment. The other thing is, if you are struggling because your environment's never going to match it. So for example, I'll use the this poor Calathea. But say this Calathea, I can't give it the humidity that it needs because, I don't know, I'm a person who overheats all the time, which is true, by the way. I am still sleeping with like a fan on me even in the middle of the winter because I overheat even in the winter, which means that at the moment that there is the smallest amount of heat in the summer is I need the aircon on in the bedroom. Because aircon is not a common thing in the UK, trust me. It should be, we're getting there slowly, but but it is one of those things that I know that I can't have this, for example, in my bedroom. Or say that was the whole house was air conditioned and it's always dry because the heating is on and it's drying out the air all the winter long, and then the aircon is on all summer long because I would overheat otherwise. This isn't going to work well for me. If I know somebody who's got a much more humid home, or if they've got a bathroom that they keep really humid, there's other issues there that they might need to be looking at for their house, but their environment might be better. Gift that to that individual. They're probably going to do a lot better in their environment. And the biggest thing I can say, and I know this is going to be glaringly obvious at this point, go for a plant that is happy in your environment. I mean, I still swear by this plant, by the way. I'll put the name of the plant on the screen so you can see this. I got this, I don't think I've ever seen it anywhere else. I think I've got this from Grow Tropicals. They occasionally have this in there. I'll kind of put up my 10% discount code if you want to use it, but this is a very cool plant. So, such a dream to take care of. And I know other people actually that have tried this in different environments. They've also had success with this. So this is, I'm not going to say a plant is easy, but this has been a more straightforward plant for me to replicate its environment in here. Granted, that is something to bear in mind, but very, very cool. So yeah, if you can get plants that will likely do well in your environment, guess what that means? That plant for you in your environment is easy because you don't have to do anything. It's a plug and play plant. It will like this environment. There you go. So really briefly, what is the best plant strategy? This might surprise nobody at this point in the video, is choose plants that work with your environment without you having to do anything to adjust for it. Yes, this isn't taking into consideration likes and dislikes, because I hear you on that one. It's just like, but I can only grow these types of plants in my environment. I don't like those types of plants. That's fine, but just assume that you are basically playing the game on hard mode the whole way through. Do not take into account anybody that's saying this plant that you know. So for example, if you've got a very dry house and you want to have something like a fern, and somebody would just say, this fern is really easy. This fern is really easy as long as you're giving it fern conditions. If you are growing all of your ferns in the exact opposite conditions, that easy fern is still going to be hard mode for you because the environment is fighting against you at that point. So some examples, some low light rooms, for instance, you might be looking at pothoses or philodendrons. And by low light, I still mean that they need to have light. I'm not talking about putting things into the pitch black, but lights, rooms that are not like brightly lit because they are getting a whole bunch of southern facing light. you can see how that would work for some of these plants that are okay and a bit more adjusted to having slightly lower bright indirect light levels. If you've got dry homes, again, it will come as no surprise. That will be your Hoyas, your Sansevierias. They will do generally fine, but again, even some of the Hoyas, they need certain levels of humidity, so some Hoyas might not do as well in a dry environment. Do your research. And then for your brighter homes, your ficuses, your succulents, your cacti, they're going to do great because that's what they need. That's what they're used to getting in their natural environment, which you can easily replicate by doing nothing because your house already ticks those boxes, or your room in your house ticks that box. And just some final thoughts, and the big thing is a successful kind of plant collection, or somebody successfully growing plants in their house, are the individuals that are growing plants that don't fight their environment. They're the ones that are literally just plug and play. You can put them straight into your home. You don't need to do anything because your exact environment is as close as you can possibly get to their natural habitat. You will get actually easy plants in your case, easy plants that will grow happily, that won't have too many setbacks, because you don't have to fight everything and you don't have to make adjustments constantly to replicate their environment. Your environment itself is doing that for you. It's already there. And the big thing that I would always say is, and this is something that we don't do in the household conditions, observe your house first, take note of things before you start looking at plants. So I'll give you an example when it comes to kind of garden situations. Why is it that in gardens, we already know that it's just like, oh, you know what? I've got that tree. It's got like a really shaded location there, but it's also a bit boggy. You don't even question it at that point. You go to a garden center, anywhere else that you buy your garden plants, and you just go, right, where's the section for the low light garden plants or the boggy plants? And you do that. You immediately do that for your garden. Very rarely, if ever, have I ever heard anybody say that about their home. So it's very much like, oh, I like this plant. It's tropical one. I'll be able to do it. It's a house plant. It says house plant. I'll take it. I will make it work somehow. Look at your house first. Look at where you're planning to put plants and buy plants for that condition, for that location, for your environment. And trust me, thank me later. That's when you get the truly easy plants. That slight mind shift is big thing. But yes, before I let you go, I am curious from all of you, do you agree with what I've just said? Have you had experiences where you fought with a plant for a long period of time? Tell us down below. I'm curious to see what easy plants that a lot of people consider easy, some of all of us have kind of struggled with in different conditions, and maybe say, okay, I had a pothos and I was growing it in this condition and it struggled for me and I just couldn't grow a pothos. Of all things, everybody always says that pothos is easy to care. I couldn't care for it. There is no shame in the comments, but I think that would be really good to highlight to everybody, that is just like, oh wow, look at that. And also, yes, if you are the kind of person that can always keep a Calathea happy and you think the Calatheas are easy, tell us down below and tell us why and what your conditions are like to make that plant easy for you, because that might make things click and some people go, oh, it's easy for you because you've got all of these things where you've got your house plants. I don't. That's probably why it's not easy for me. See, it's really interesting. I'm really curious to see what you're all going to say down below. But yes, I think I'll let you go. Hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon. And I truly hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.